Chapter 20, Liberty, Equality and Fraternity, July to September 1944. With the promise of summer, the Second World War entered a very positive phase for the Allies in 1944. After success in North Africa in the latter part of 42 and the Allied invasion of Sicily and the landings at Salerno in 1943, followed by the Anzio attack in January 1944, the German forces were losing their Italian stronghold. The Russians were becoming more powerful in the east, pushing ever closer towards Germany since the surrender of Hitler's troops at Stalingrad early in 1943. Even in Southeast Asia, the Allied battle against the Japanese, part of Adolf Hitler's axis of evil, was gaining momentum daily. And of course, the daring Operation Overlord, which had culminated in the D-Day landings of June 6th along the coastline of Normandy, had been a triumph beyond even the wildest dreams of the Commander-in-Chief, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Remarkably, Eisenhower had never actually seen active service, but he was nevertheless a superb administrator who was greatly admired by all the men he commanded, not least because of his pleasant and affable character. The respect and trust of the troops was of vital importance to Eisenhower because he knew that once Operation Overlord began, every soldier, sailor and airman, regardless of rank or experience, would be key if the battle for Normandy was to be won. The Allies could have taken a shorter route to France across the English Channel from Dover to Calais, but they deliberately chose a different route. In point of fact, this is precisely what Hitler and his generals were anticipating, and the Allies did all they could to convince the enemy that this was indeed the case. Secrecy had been paramount, because the element of surprise was vital if Operation Overlord stood any chance of succeeding. A concerted campaign, Operation Fortitude, was instigated to keep the Germans believing that the invasion would target Calais, and events soon proved that it had served its purpose. Adolf Hitler was fully aware that an attack on the Western Front through France was imminent, but early in 1944, the Soviet Red Army in southern Russia was giving him a great deal more cause for concern. The Nazis attempted to stem the Russian tide by building large fortifications, but Hitler's fears of being forced into a retreat by the Allies on all fronts were being proved well-founded. Also, the Americans were now dominant in the Pacific against the ever-tenacious Japanese. Because of the sheer size of the US Navy, the Japanese were finding it difficult to secure the islands that they had previously seized. However, for the Americans, containment was the watchword during these crucial months of 1944, because until Europe was liberated, they would have to fight on without any Allied reinforcements, while the European theatre of war became the primary focus as Operation Overlord progressed. In the weeks following D-Day, the Allied invasion force steadily made progress, liberating the people of France literally village by village. The excitement was rising, and after so many years of Nazi oppression, the Allies received the warmest of welcomes from those they set free. Back in Great Britain, news of the triumphant landing certainly boosted morale, but for Adolf Hitler, as the realization dawned that the battle for Normandy was being lost, it was time to retaliate. Hitler had always promised the German people that he had a secret weapon, and with news of the events in France travelling fast, he needed to boost morale and reaffirm the Nazi position of strength. The weapon in question was the V1 bomb, taking its name from a German word meaning weapon of vengeance, and it most certainly was. The effectiveness of these bombs came from the fact that they were unpiloted, basically an early cruise missile that could be launched from mainland Europe across the Channel to target Britain. After being launched, the precise autopilot technology would accurately track the target area where it was due to detonate, and the damage the bombs could do was horrific. Powered by a combination of petrol and compressed air, the V1 could travel at great speed. They made a very loud buzzing sound from the jet engine that pulsated 50 times a second, and this buzz gave the V1s many nicknames, including the Buzz Bomb and the Doodle Bug, after a loud Australian insect. The sound was terrifying enough, but when it went silent, it was dangerous, with there being about 15 seconds before the huge explosion. However, for Hitler and the German developers of the V1, there was one major disadvantage. There was no way they could be sure whether the bombs had reached their
Sample complete. Ready to continue?